Good evening. Tonight is Tuesday. Yeah, I'm on Tuesday, April 18th. Welcome those that have joined us via technology on the Zoom. Please be advised that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube as well as recorded. Thanks for those in the room that have joined us, and apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties getting our streaming to be live and all set up. So thank you for your patience. With that, we have really three things tonight. One is our minutes approval. So we'll start with that. I actually did not, now that I think about it, take a look at these. I'm hoping somebody else did, and at this point would call for a motion for anyone that has had a chance to review those and adopt those into the record.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes as I'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes as they are recorded.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. Any discussion before we vote? All in favor? And Jay, I can't see your vote. There we go. That looked unanimous. Teresa, thank you everyone for that. Our agenda tonight, we'll start with a public hearing. This is with respect to a mixed residential overlay ordinance that we are reviewing tonight. This has been something that's been in the works in a few of our previous general sessions for those of you that have been part of that. Before opening up the public hearing, I thought we might proceed like this and have Jake just provide a brief overview on how an overlay zone works, first of all, and then kind of the intent behind this particular ordinance.
Thank you, Chair. An overlay zone tool, think about it this way, that rather than it being pre-assigned to a specific area in the zoning code or on the zoning map, is kind of this tool that's up in the cloud, so to speak. It's a zoning tool and ordinance that's available and is assigned to a specific property after it is approved through legislative action. First, a recommendation by the Planning Commission and then approval by the City Council. An applicant would pick a specific property that applies, and they would make the application, and then through that process, the city would allow it or not allow it. And then after it is rezoned, if it is approved to be rezoned, then on the zoning map, it would show that area has been rezoned as an overlay. Typically on a map, it's kind of a hatch, where you see what's underneath and you see this diagonal line on top. And also it's intended to act as essentially a bonus density for doing some of doing all the requirements that are in the ordinance. State law does allow us to do some of the things that we're requesting with architecture and landscape standards and other items, because it's an overlay zone, and essentially you get a higher amount of density or residential units in an area, and hence the higher design requirements and the higher density. The mixed residential ordinance, mixed residential overlay is intended to create smaller neighborhoods, 2.5 to 10 acres. They must have a mixture of housing types. There's 2 lists. One list is small and medium single family, and then the other list is townhomes and twin homes. And so the developer must use a mixture of both when they do their site plan and their development. And the idea is that you have a neighborhood that's not so vanilla, all of the same building types and architecture styles, really mix it up. The homes could and hopefully are more affordable because they're smaller lots, smaller sizes. However, They could also end up being nicer and higher end as well. The ordinance doesn't require in terms of price point on that. However, one of the best ways to bring down the cost of housing is a smaller lot because the cost of the land is so significant. Some of the requirements for the MRO, I've mentioned the housing mixture type. Also, the homes must either front onto the street, they must face the street, the doors, or they must face a common green or park. There is a requirement of open space, 15%, so that there is play area, place to play soccer, frisbee, not a soccer game with a referee, but pickup kind of thing. Have play areas for kids and others that live in the neighborhood. It does have requirements with architecture that no single home next to another can be the same. Things must vary with, architecture must vary with styles, colors, materials, windows, doors, roof lines, just a number of materials, a number of items requiring variation. So we don't get what people call cookie cutter architecture. And the garages also are a little bit unique. They either have to be alley loaded, coming from an alley behind, or they have to be set back from the front of the home. Those are the two options. That way the architecture is focused on the home and less on the garage. There is requirements for landscape, that the areas are landscaped, and also that there's trees planted in the park strip. I think that's an overview of most of it.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Just a clarification before we jump in, and we'll open the public hearing through parliamentary action. But if we could clarify after this session, where we'll take action, either a favorable or a non-favorable recommendation to the city council, will there be a second public hearing? Assuming we send this on that way.
On to the city council.
City council.
Does your process doesn't require that? No.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I thought we changed that. I remember, we discussed it. I wasn't sure where that landed.
And there, I mean, the public could always present comments, in the public part of the meeting, or email the city council or mayor. But yes,
Okay.
sure. Yep.
So they would have an opportunity potentially if there's additional voice that they'd like to share. We have one member of the public that I can count joining our meeting today. So thank you for coming. Hope you have a lot to say. Before you jump in, let's thank you for the background. So the action before us tonight is to either provide a positive or negative recommendation to the city council with respect to this mixed residential overlay ordinance as outlined. And let's do this. Let's start by opening the public hearing formally with a motion, and then we'll let the extensive public voice their thoughts. Once we've closed the public hearing, then we'll deliberate as a commission. So if we can open that up, that'd be great.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I move we open public hearing.
thank you. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
The public hearing is now open. Anyone that would like to participate, step to the mic, state your name, and share your thoughts.
Oh, there we go. Ryan Nye. I'll try to keep it to an hour, but anyway. A couple things. I appreciate Jake. He's worked hard on this. He's done a lot of time and effort into it, and and made changes to try and so that it's not going to be perfect for first go around probably, and you're going to probably have to make some minor adjustments. A couple things that I saw that could be problematic. Ray Little, he actually brought it up in one of the meetings as a question, and it was the parking being 3 stalls for every unit. And 3 is, I ran into 2 different things is what I see. And I went down and I talked with an engineer for one at Great Basin. And I also I was down in St. George, and I went, holy cow, this is exactly what was in that MRO. And so I actually took a couple pictures of it, and I wish I would have taken this other angle, but being 3 stalls there for each one of them is pretty steep. What I found out is it's about 2.5 is what they come out to be. A couple things. Ray had asked the question, says, well, that means you're getting a parking stall every 3 houses or a parking lot, which to me, it's almost a deterrent of this small community that you're trying to build, right? And so it's almost, okay, kind of hide some parking a little bit better. This one, and I wish I had the picture of it, but it's in St. George, and how they did it was they had the townhouse area, and then you go into it, and it had the parking along there that was back behind the sidewalk and that. So it's not just a widening in the road and have angle parking or, problems that way. The other thing is it was in there, it has within 100 feet of the dwelling. So that was every 3rd house, you're getting a parking lot. So, with that being said, down there, they had both of those criterias. One at 2.5, it was a 2.5, and it was at about 150 feet is what to that last building or houses. And so by doing so, now you can kind of group that visitor parking essentially is what it is. Am I correct in this? It's visitor parking. So giving you a little bit more room and not having to put it every 3rd house, you get bonus density out of this, but then you lose it in putting parking lots all the way through this whole thing. So that's where I saw it was problematic for me, is I went, well, man, this is going to be difficult to hit the 3 stalls on everything, especially on the ones. It's 3, right?
I clarify, one's required to be on lot in the garage. So there's like 2 offsite. One's required to be on lot. There'll be 2.
Isn't it
offsite.
2?
There'll be 2 offsite. One's required on the lot in the garage.
It's like on a
3 total.
3
One's
total.
required- One's required on site.
Oh, just 1 on site?
That's required. So if you had 2 on site, maybe you only have 1 off site. If you arrange your home so you'd have 3 on site, you would need any off site. You just have 3 total. 1 needs to
Right.
be on
And with
site.
those setbacks, and that would be impossible.
I agree.
So that's what this is the problem that I was running into, and Ray, that's what made me think of it. And so I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then you start actually putting it to paper, and it becomes difficult. And so that's what I say, is it 2.5? That's what I saw. I've hammered that enough. So the other thing was the frontage on these. Is that flexible in the way of on a radius?
Good question, yeah.
You see what I mean?
So I think it would be, we just didn't put that in the document. But it
Yeah.
should be, yes.
So I don't know how or what, but that's what you run into, is this pie shape. And so maybe some verbiage on that on these radiuses. But anyway, I think that's all that reading through it, that I could see stood out to me. But anyway, thanks for the time.
Comment on that?
Please do. I think we can go ahead and, before we close the public hearing.
Yeah.
Have some, maybe if there's any.
So I'm glad this was brought up because we actually have both in there. So we definitely need to fix it. I've got pulled up on the screen. So a minimum of one garage stall is required per dwelling.
Right.
And then down here, and actually it'll be whatever the number we end up at. And then each unit must have dedicated 2 stalls per unit located at the dwelling. It's right there. That's what is in there.
So if we're going 3 required total, okay.
And it is 3. And Ryan's correct. We don't have anywhere in there that the setback changes on a radius. So that's something that we could look at as well. If you think about the 100 feet, our lot width is like 80 feet. Is that right? In Morgan City, a typical lot? 70 and 80. So at 150, it's basically, think about it as 2 lots down. And if that were a visitor parking, that's not a bad thing to be. And that's the maximum. They could be smaller. And this was intended not to be big parking lots, but smaller ones located around the development.
Just to clarify, the maximum is 150 on that distance.
What we have is 100.
Well, we have 100, but I thought you said the maximum was 150.
He recommended that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I just didn't know if there's some other governing ordinance.
No, there's not.
But again, I'm not very smart. If you're going, got a 4-foot setback to your garage from the alleyway, there's no way you're gonna get 2 cars on site. Unless you can drop better than I can.
This is it right here. So it's the alley is a minimum of 16, and then there's a little bit of wiggle room of landscape on the side. And they're intended to, alleys are intended to be slow. Sometimes you got to pull out of the way, let somebody go by.
You're missing what I said. What's the setback from the property line to your garage?
The minimum is 4 feet.
4 feet. So
You
if
can go more if you'd like
If you
to.
go 4 feet, there's no way you can get a car on that 4 feet.
And that's correct. And that's intended. It's not intended to necessarily, because you're parking in the garage,
If you have 2 in the garage.
or you can move it back farther and have one in a driveway. That it allows for flexibility.
See, if you're looking at single family, or if you're looking
Yeah, it's
at
a little different.
multi-family, the townhouse. So on a single family, your setback's 7 feet. And then the garage is another 4 feet minimum, so you're at least 11 feet, right? And so then you could slide that back further if you wanted to.
Ray was talking about the rear setback,
Rear foot.
Okay.
the front setback.
I thought you was talking park. Get that.
I was talking alleyway. If you garage to the alleyway, I'm not how you get the parking there.
Yeah, so if you look at on the screen,
I'm looking.
so there's 2 ways to do that.
One on the right, you could, yes. I
Yeah, the
get
one on
that.
the right, you park here, and the one on the left, you just pull right into the garage.
You have to have a double garage.
Yeah, and what we're requiring is 2 at the unit, and at least 1 has to be in a garage.
Right.
Is that how it reads?
So how do you get the second one out the unit? If you want one in the garage.
So either the builder does a 2-car garage, or they do tandem, which is 1 in a driveway and 1 in a 1-car garage. It allows for flexibility.
If you're at a townhouse, your minimum lot width is 24 feet. And you've got 5 foot on each side, makes 14 foot. Can you get a 2-car garage in 14 feet? Mr. Builder, can you get a 2-car garage in 14 feet wide?
Yeah, compacts.
Going to be at least 22 feet wide.
You can't do that. If you go the minimum lot width of 24 feet.
You're building home to home. It's attached houses are 0 setback.
So
So
That-
there's not a space between them.
Yeah,
what
yep.
about on the side? Okay. Okay. So how's lot with, what is lot with, how's lot with that? There's zero side,
Yeah, it's it's zero, like where the home comes to the home,
Right,
the
right.
firewall,
right,
that's the property line.
right down the middle.
Yep.
Built on the line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's typical for townhomes. 24 is a typical minimum townhome. Sometimes they go up to 28 or so.
Around that width, single family or single car garage, they'll go a little bit narrower, 22 to 23, that's pretty small, but 24, like you're saying, up to maybe 20.
Okay, but that's for townhomes. How about condos?
Or twin home.
This doesn't really allow for a stacked condo. That's not in this ordinance.
So that's not in part of this,
No.
okay.
So if someone wanted to do, stacked units on units, that's not in here.
Oh, okay.
So if I can clarify,
Okay.
there's two things I'm confused with. So one, if you look at the chart, it's exactly as Ryan had shared, 3 stalls per dwelling. I thought I heard you say that those weren't incremental. That if you had one in the garage, you only need 2 total per dwelling. So you really only need 1 more outside the garage somewhere. Or is it 1 in the garage and 2 more for sure?
Yeah.
So go back to that language, and I
Okay.
couldn't tell if that was,
And maybe we need to clarify that.
or if it's, one or the other.
Okay, so right here, there must be an average of 3 stalls per dwelling unit for the entire development. That's the same 3 number. Stalls located within the garages count towards this number. A minimum of 1 garage stall is required per dwelling.
And that's how I understood it. I momentarily got confused. I thought I heard
Keep
that,
going, makes sense. Keep going.
Non-garage stalls may be located in a separate parking area within 100 feet.
okay,
Each unit must have dedicated 2 stalls per unit located at the dwelling.
and that 100 feet of the dwelling counts as located at the dwelling.
And no, that means adjacent to, essentially, and maybe we change that word to say adjacent. What is intended by that language is that it's either in the garage or it's at the driveway.
Do it.
And the idea is
2 at
that,
the dwelling, and if you do that, you need 1 more
One
at
more.
the community parking lot.
correct,
Okay.
and essentially a visitor parking.
Sure.
And Ryan's requested that that you consider that as a half stall as visitor parking, which our visitor parking, I think, is 1 per 3 on multifamily. So it still is even a little bit more than and I think that's okay because these are gonna be bigger dwelling units than a multifamily. And the other thing to remember is this will be included as on-street parking because the street will be the normal city street. And so there will be on-street parking.
But that doesn't count as a stall.
Correct. It's not included. What I'm saying is there's even more parking that will be included in that. And the on-street parking will be according to city ordinances. We're not touching that, the winter time at night, not allowed type of thing.
So on a single car garage, 1 car in the garage and 1 behind it is 2 stall. That takes up you're allowing 2 cars, right?
Right.
Then you only need 1 more.
You can only do that if you have the setback.
That's right.
Far enough to pull a car
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
driveway.
Or you have a 2-car garage and you park 2 inside.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't overthink that because like in your drawing there, so a townhouse setting, if they were all 2-car garage, then it's fine, or if they're all single car garage, then it's fine. To widen that out and you park them along there, but if you have a mixed, a double and then single, so that it fits on the lot, you have to narrow it down or whatever. And you go and you put one car in front of that single car garage, you're almost creating a block in your alleyway, unless it's a small car. So on those single car garages, in my eyes, it should be that one is required there, but still have to be within the premises of that building. You see what I mean? To get that second one, not directly right in front of the door. Otherwise, you're creating a problem, especially in the winter time when you push snow through that alley.
Jay, go ahead. You've got the floor.
I think we experienced that at behind Tractor Supply with those one-car garage units on those. There's another parking stall just kind of to the side by the front door on the asphalt. So they weren't in tandem.
That's allowed. I think that's a better setup for sure.
I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Behind Tractor Supply, they experienced that. They got on the one-car garages back there. Then basically right to the side of where the garage exits, there's another parking stall right there, kind of like in front of their front door on the asphalt outside. So it's not in tandem. Does that make sense? And then the other comment I just had was on some of those pictures, you were talking about I understand it seems like we're talking about the minimum right now, and that's good. It's good to talk about the minimum because a lot of times that's how we're going to build it. But in some of these examples, in some of these photos, like in the attachment, when we're getting into, let's say, maybe it's section 4, and we get down into some of those driveways on like in G. You see some long driveways there. Some of the garages are set behind the home. So you got a lot of asphalt, or you got a lot of concrete that's poured there. It just raised a question in my mind. If you've got a house with a garage behind it and a big old long driveway, wouldn't some of those homes in that example, I'm not saying that's how Ryan's building his, but wouldn't one of those homes potentially have 6 or 7 stalls in that driveway and in that garage to where they would, some of those might have a ton of parking stalls to really offset the overall average. Does that make sense?
I think so.
And that's where that distance to each home comes in, because that requires it to be spread out so that it ends up being smaller parking areas and not such a far distance.
I think it's a little bit more clear. Any other comments while we have public hearing open? With Ryan, so that's the first piece with parking. That's something that we can continue to discuss and make a decision on it. I'm wondering, let's say we were to make a change to the draft ordinance. If we were to pass this on, let's say with a favorable recommendation of city council, could we do so with that change? Or does it have to be rewritten and a new public hearing and start the process over because the language is different?
No, your first method is correct.
Okay.
You would say, we recommend this with these specific changes. And then when the city council sees it, it's as if those changes had been implemented in a new clean version.
Okay, thank you.
But in regard to on the street parking, we have an ordinance in the city that you can't park on the street from all the winter months, 5 or 6 months, right?
At night,
At
Right.
night. Yeah. So they can't leave a car over there overnight.
and that's okay. That the street parking is complimentary and beneficial, but not required. And that's where 2.5 to 3 stalls per unit should be sufficient.
To Jay's point, just to clarify, if you have one unit that has a really long driveway and it has 4 or 5 stalls, is that still going to count to the overall average of 3 stalls per unit? Everybody would still be required to have their 2 minimum, but does that go to the average even though it's not public or visitor parking?
No, it wouldn't. Let's just say a single family has more. It's not going to be. And maybe we need to add a sentence just to clarify that. Let's just say a single family home had a 2-car garage and a 2-car driveway that that still doesn't meet that 1 or half stall visitor parking should stand alone. So I think we could come up with a sentence or two that does that. And so that each unit has its assigned 2 stalls at the unit, which if you own or you rent, that belongs to you. And then the visitor parking, that half or 1 stall per total is essentially flexible. And that's the intended
Clarifying
purpose.
language.
I
Yeah,
think we do
say
need to clarify
two-
that
2 at the
language.
dwelling, 1 has to be in the garage and 1 more
Somewhere else.
publicly available. Yeah.
The
I
other-
think this is a very key point because my daughter lives in Saratoga Springs and there's 100 condos, 50 on one side and 50 on the other. And every time we go to see her, there's no place to park. And I asked her, I said, well, did they require additional parking anywhere? And she said, oh yeah, there's 6 stalls up here and 6 stars over there for 50 condos. And when we go to visit her, it's almost impossible to find a place to park. And there's a couple places right on the street, but it's so narrow that nobody will park there. So I think it's a very critical item that we decide exactly what's required and we make sure that we don't cut it short because it's very frustrating for people that want to go visit somebody.
But along those lines, I kind of wanted to ask you, Ryan, for a little bit more information about, you said by allowing all this extra parking, you're losing some of that density. Do you see that as an issue as a builder, as a developer? Is it costing you
Yeah.
density to have to put in this parking every? Okay.
Absolutely. The parking lot don't make money. That's, as a developer, that's gotta have so many units to make some earn a profit. So that's what I say, and it's at that 2.5, and I have seen, that's what that engineer, he was telling me, Mark, he says, Mark down there as well. So, but he's seeing it as low as 2.25. And I said, well, they're at 3 right now. And he said, well, 2.5 is what I commonly see, but that's one opinion on what he sees. And then what I saw down there was sufficient parking down in St. George, and it was busy. It was on spring break weekend, but it was at 2.5. So, but it had 2-car garages, and I pulled my truck, and I've got a crew cab long bed, and I was able to make that turn and get and park my truck into there. My truck is actually too long with the hitch on there to park inside, so I parked out there, but they pulled a different vehicle inside the garage too.
Go ahead, Mayor. With the constraints as far as size and things, would it be possible to have a 2-car garage for all the units? Is that possible or not?
And we've talked about these a little bit, me and Jake, on some of these, depending upon how much width you have on the whole project.
Right.
How big that road comes through and these alleys and that. Sometimes it just lays out better to have 2-car garage, and then you can't fit that next 2-car garage, but I can fit a single. And so I can get that extra unit in there and it fits on that lot. Or back on one of these radiuses that we talked about, is here you got this radius. Well, it sits perfect for a twin house. But that twin house wouldn't be counted towards my 10% that I need to meet. And so therefore I go, well, I gotta throw that out the window. But it would fit better and it would look better. You see what I mean? And so
But-
that's why I
but
if we
10%.
have some flexibility and go, okay, it common sense.
The
says
twin
this
does-
fits.
The twin does count towards your minimum of 30% of each type.
But if I'm right at the border of the 10, hitting is it, 30%, if I'm right at the border of that. And I go, okay, the twin house goes into the category of the 60%. Where I
Yeah.
need it into the 30% to get me there, and it makes sense to have it there. But I can't do it because I have to hit the 30, split it, and now it's kind of hard to get in and out, but it fits. You see what I'm saying? And that's
I-
really case by case.
I
type
do.
thing.
This ordinance is extremely progressive for Morgan City.
So that's what I say.
And
If
you're,
there's a little flexibility.
we have to draw the line somewhere.
Absolutely.
And the thing about this ratio of a minimum of 30% single family, land coverage, like if you were to look at it on Google Earth, it's actually about 50% land coverage. So that means when somebody drives through the neighborhood, unless they're paying close attention, it's gonna look and feel a little bit like half and half, even though it could be 70-30, if that makes sense. I've looked at this quite a bit in the past and had some projects built. No, it's dwelling units in the ordinance, but it's intended so that for that look, so yeah, so it's not a token single family home here, there, and you move into that home and you're the only guy on the street or girl that's in the house and everybody else is townhomes and it's a little, so we have to draw the line somewhere. From planning, I don't see an issue dropping to a half a stall per unit as visitor parking if the planning commission's okay with that, and also bumping up the 100 to 150 feet.
The reason I asked that question, if you give a 2-car garage, and you can at least put one in your driveway, then that unit doesn't need any additional parking. It's already got 3. Your parking lot would not need to include that unit.
Right.
You just need to take the units that have a single garage and have enough parking for those single garage units. That's what I was trying to go with. As a builder, when your setbacks, I don't know if it works, have more, if you have more double garages with enough driveway to car there, you don't even need to have a parking lot. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Maybe you can't, I don't know.
Can I clarify that though, because the way that it looks like we're writing this up is there still needs to be visitor stalls,
It'd be
right?
3 per unit.
Three per unit, 2 on premise, but does on premise include, so that middle paragraph or sentence between the green, non-garage stalls. So I'm assuming that means that's one of your 2 required at the dwelling. Non-garage stalls may be located within 100 feet. So does that,
If you got,
it's that within 100 feet, and then later we're saying this visitor parking. And to me, those are getting conflated.
yeah, and we really do need specific visitor parking because they will have visitors and there needs to be, I mean, it's in the RM zone. It's very typical in a townhome development to have some visitor parking.
So
Two per unit is probably the minimum I would go in Morgan City because some people are gonna put toys in their garage, ATVs, bikes, right? It's pretty common. Garages are storage too. And so that's where they're gonna be parking their car in that visitor parking all the time. And the HOA will have to work that
So
through.
again, to clarify the language then, when we say the 2 at the dwelling, your options really are in the garage or in the driveway.
And a minimum of 1 in a garage.
Yes, but the language where we're saying within 100 feet of the dwelling, that's where I'm getting confused. Because
And that's intended for the visitor parking.
So let's just clarify that, because right now I know you're in the middle of drafting it, but we've got it worded both ways.
Oh, yeah. And so
So-
this I would cross out because we do handle it.
Okay, so, go ahead.
But if you have three at your residence, okay, you'll need an extra one in the parking lot. Is that correct or not?
The hard thing is, let's just say, one scenario is half the units have three and then the other half just have the visitor parking. Does that work? And and that means that if you live there and you have three cars or you have stuff in your garage, and so you're always parking there, that third stall is not open to flexible public use.
And so
Yeah.
maybe if you word it where you have two required, one has to be in the garage, and then there's either one or a half a unit allocated for visitor parking.
So
I'm
you're
being
saying
honest.
like this single family home with got enough place for 6 cars, they still gotta have one more elsewhere?
Yeah.
No,
Hold on a second. These lots are gonna be really small. Nobody's gonna be putting 6 at a single family. Maybe 4, maybe 4. And here's an idea.
well, if the
What-
garage in the back would rather go the whole length of the house.
What
you
if
can get
that,
6 cars there.
what if that half visitor stall is just for the attached units, either the twin homes or the townhomes? I think that's where we actually hit the bullseye, is because visitor park, a single family is gonna probably have a driveway, and they're also gonna be on the street. And so they will have that flexibility for visitors. And so that visitor parking is just required for the townhomes and twin homes. And I think that hits the bullseye of meeting the flexible need, but not requiring extensive. What do you think about that?
Sure. I see with like these lots are really small, Ray.
Right.
So even on a single family to park that anywhere, then you're only looking, like you say, max 4. I don't even see how you're gonna get 4. It'd be tough.
You think you might just be doing the 2 on the single family?
Yeah, I think that you're gonna see single family
Okay.
houses because of on a small single family lot, you're gonna see single car garages. But they're, on the medium sized ones, you'll see more of the 2-car garage.
Okay.
So that's why yeah, you're only,
Talk about where that garage is.
well, that's the thing is you do have that setback from the frontage, you're set back 7 feet to the house and then 4 feet to the
The
garage.
garage is gonna be 20 feet back from public lot.
So you're only 11 feet. So you could push back a little bit further and now you can get something in the garage and one
The
behind.
garage is gotta be 20 feet back from property line in front, setback to the garage. There's 2 standards there.
Or you're coming in from the alley, because you can do alley on the single family as well.
You're missing one piece of that.
I'd say even
Help
at
him
the
out.
20 feet, you're only parking 1 car there because that car is one in the garage on a single garage. You're gonna put 1 inside and 1 outside.
In 20 feet.
That's all you're getting in 20 feet. Otherwise, you're out in the road. On that
From the
second
front of the
car.
garage, you're probably gonna get 20 feet.
On the screen, basically saying this example right here, maybe this is a single car, one car in the garage, in the driveway, and 1 car
Yeah, that's all you're gonna get.
right there.
Is
In this case, that could be easily 4+.
On either one of those other cases.
Yeah, certainly.
So Jake, I was thinking that just a verbiage change on that portion, if you put there must be an average of 3 or 2.5 per stalls per dwelling unit for the entire development stalls, with garages counting toward that number. A minimum of 1 stall is required per dwelling. Then go to each unit must have dedicated 2 stalls per location located at dwelling. A visitor or non-parking, a visitor parking of 1 to a half can be within 150 feet. I think changing just that wording take that non-garage stalls out
Okay,
and take, and move everything up and then put the, maybe a visitor or guest parking is one and a half, or whatever you decide to do, a half stop.
look at
Just
this
wanna-
that I have right here.
I would take out the whole thing with this average piece. Like, I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes. Just each unit must have a minimum of 2 dedicated stalls. One needs to be in a garage, one can be in the driveway. And then for every unit, there needs to be a half visitor stall allocated within 150 feet of the dwelling. And I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that.
So let me ask you a question on that. So on your townhouses in that alleyway, like we talked about, is you have a car sitting in front like that shows. You're potentially blocking that alley.
Like which one, which side you showing?
So if you look at that
Which one?
depiction there.
There's two, which one you talking about?
The left or the right?
Left or right?
Well, this one is driving.
Driving, so the other one's parked, right? The one on the right is parked.
Yep.
So you're potentially blocking that alleyway. So if that's a single car garage, you're gonna have one sitting outside in that alleyway. So being on premises, does that mean right in front of your garage door, or can it be at the end of the building because it's on that premises of those townhouses?
If it was an end unit, you could park on the side. But nobody's parking in the alley. I mean, you're either on the driveway or you're in the garage.
But that one car shouldn't be there.
Well, this is intended to show driving.
It doesn't say that, so you don't know it's driving.
Can I give you a picture real
Driving.
quick?
I can say it's driving or park.
Yes, while you're doing that, Lance, you had a comment earlier. We never heard from you. Do you still want to share?
See how there's no parking. in
Yeah,
that
and
alley?
that's essentially this on the left.
This is
That's,
on both sides,
or, right,
so they can pull in, but then all their parking was at the ends of the buildings.
yeah.
And they created that half or whole stall across the ends of the building where they lined up all the.
And what
way
you're
down
talking about is
perpendicular.
100% possible with the ordinance. That's 100% possible. This is showing two options.
So
Don't
this
think of this as both at the same time. It's, you're doing the same thing on both sides.
So those are two separate pictures.
Yeah, that's the
So that's
idea.
not two buildings that are facing each other right now, like
Ye-
this.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the,
Got
it's pretty common to sometimes show two options next to each other without, and I'd be okay if you make a recommendation that I take this and show two sections that duplicate it on both sides, so there's no confusion of mixing two methods together. Yeah, show them.
It's the alleyway that's coming down. There's no parking in that alley. The parking is at the end of these running perpendicular.
The visitor parking.
It has to be in the garage or at the end of the street.
Exactly. So if there's a single family, or I mean, a single car garage in there.
That throws it
you
off.
Can't sit in that car.
Yeah, you
That's
have to
right.
design it differently.
Yeah, so if you have a
That's
single,
Consistent with how I understand it.
Two of them were back to back. And that's what I'm saying, is you wouldn't be able to have a single there.
Cause you block the alley.
Because you brought the
Yeah,
alley
that's
there.
correct.
That's why I say, can it be accepted to have that second stall if you have a single car garage? Your second stall be on the end of the building.
You can do that. You just have an alley and driveways and then the units.
The one you're showing shows the picture on the left.
Yes,
They're all like that on both sides of the road.
yes.
The other option is the one on the right, if you want to have your building set more than the 4 feet setback, then you could do the one on the right. Those are just two options. When you show we're straight, that's the option on the left.
Yeah,
And
you would
both-
have to
both
do
sides
it
do the same way.
if you do a single
Both sides
car
do the
garage.
same way.
Correct. That's how I understand it.
If it's an interior single car garage.
Unless it's set back with the driveway.
Right.
And what,
And I think that's okay. That happens.
basically, these are all members, you can mix and match, you can go down the road, you know. In fact, that's the reason for mix and match, so them all looking exactly the same way down that alleyway.
Okay, let's turn the floor over to Lance.
As part of this ordinance and the requirement of an HOA that governs and enforces the parking, can that be added into this, that's a requirement of the ordinance? Jake?
Yes. We do have right here, HOA CCNRs. We could add a second sentence under here, including management of parking.
Okay, because I think thing people forget is that I think a lot of times these homes are, not all the time, but sometimes what I see in our recent development of these, it seems there's a lot of people who are kind of maybe passing through. They're only going to be there for a little bit, and the 1-car garage turns into storage, and the 2-car garage also turns into storage. And I think the 3-car garage turns into storage. So all of a sudden, your 3 stalls, now you have none. And that's where we have, sometimes I struggle with even the 3 stalls per unit, because we have a street in town that this winter was physically not possible to snowplow because everybody's garage is a storage unit. And they also have 3 or 4 vehicles per unit, and they lose their garage stall. And in talking with that developer, it sounds like HOAs have a lot more, I don't know, power, authority than what even we do as the city to have vehicles removed.
Especially if it's a private alley, which is this case. And so the city doesn't have any control over that. So
Yeah, and
I agree.
even the public streets where you get the person who has the 3-car garage and it's turned into a 3-bay storage unit, and they have 4 vehicles and they are on the street year round in the winter, whatnot. I guess what I'm after, I think even to drop into the 2.5, would be good with that, as long as there's that HOA where when crews come in for snow removal, whatnot, it takes 1 phone call and all those cars from the people whose 3-car garage is a storage unit takes an hour and they're towed. And, the people can go about their business and, plow the roads and do the maintenance, where then it's going to be enforced, and people are going to understand that I maybe have to put my stuff away, or I have to get rid of some stuff if I'm going to live here, and I can't have my entire garage filled right full, or I won't have anywhere to park, And then, anyways, I think that's kind of my big thing with this. And I've stayed in a place very similar over spring break in St. George. I thought it was great. I personally don't want to live there. I've got too much junk, but that's my decision. I couldn't do it, but I think it was a great development, and I think it could really bring a lot to our community. But like I say, the thing we're also missing versus St. George is the snow removal. And I think as long as there's an HOA that it can be taken care of and the parking can be enforced, I think that goes a long way to kind of even the parking stuff, easing my fears of some of this stuff.
Mr. Chair, can I just have one comment, please? So we have an example in the city. Oh, sorry. We have an example in the city that isn't that fun. Where the garage is the storage shed, the driveways aren't big enough to park a mini car, let alone they're parking four-door trucks, and so it's taking into the street. So that I think is a solid thing to make sure we have down. But I have two sisters that live in similar developments as these, and they're all on a third party controls the development. And honestly, they enforce it. And it's not pinning neighbor against neighbor. So when they move in, they actually know the rules. They know the fines, they know all of that information up front. So it's not pinning it against a neighborhood. Everybody moves in knowing if mine's a storage shed, I'm gonna have platforms or something. Because you can't park in the visitors parking. You can't park on the street. So it forces that to where it keeps that flow good, especially in our situation, probably a little different in St. George's. We worry about or experience snow removal.
Yeah. Thank you. That brings to mind just one more question, which has probably been answered, but in the way that this is drafted, could the permanent resident park a vehicle in the visitor parking? And leave it there if they wanted?
We don't disallow. We do. If we go with that recommendation, we're requiring them to do parking management. And I think that's enough. I mean, if the planning commission wants to go into whether or not you could stay there, if you can park your third car there all the time or your second car, that's okay. Or you can decide, let's let the HOA through their
And I
their
don't mind,
policies
I don't
decide
mind
that.
leaving it up to the HOA to self-manage some of that. I'm just kind of thinking by ordinance, how much space we give. And if we move from 100 feet to 150 feet, so that makes it so there's less parking lots needed potentially. It feels like maybe the 3 might be more appropriate at that distance. If we left it 100 feet, then maybe the half. I said that wrong. A full unit extra versus a half unit. If it's 100 feet versus 150 feet, kind of what I'm thinking. As opposed to you could go all the way and do 150 feet and half. But it kind of feels like what I'm hearing a lot of tonight is this premium for parking. These are smaller homes. It feels like there's going to be a demand for that. And the design of the development, maybe need to accommodate that somehow. I don't know. That's what it feels like I'm hearing.
The current city's RM zone is 1 visitor parking per 3. So at a half or 1, we are above that. I don't know if there's an issue with what you have with the current RM developments, but that's up to the planning commission. And there's always people deciding, I don't want to buy there because there's not enough parking, or I need to get rid of junk because I live there and I can't park, or I can't have vehicles I'm working on at my unit. There is a little bit of that self-policing, and however you want to go with
As
it.
part of it, excuse me, as part of an MRO, could it be a requirement that they have an HMO?
An HOA, yes,
Okay, I mean.
that's in
HMA,
there.
Right. So that's a requirement.
It is.
Okay.
There's no other way around it because they're going to have common areas. There's going to be these common areas, and there has to be some association that's responsible that the grass is cut and the playground's painted every 10 years or whatever. And we do require their CC&Rs to be approved by the city.
Go ahead, Ray.
Help me understand something. I do understand. On townhomes, you have 5 of them together. And they're, they've got walls. So, and then at the end of the 5th one, help me understand what the minimum side yard, how that plays into it. Apparently it's not for each law, is it for the 5 of them? How does that side yard play into the townhome? We have 5 side by side. I don't understand. I'm not picking anything. I don't
Yeah.
understand that.
It's just the end units have a side yard.
So would the end units be 5 feet smaller than the others potentially?
No,
You just have to have 5 foot on each of the end units.
Yeah. that's correct.
So the 24 feet is immaterial for each unit can be a different width, different size.
So
Not individually owned then. If
they can be, yes.
They're platted, so they're individually owned. So if I've got 24 feet, I'm in the middle of the 5. I got 24 feet from my plot lot. How's a 5 feet, the guy on the end get shorter than 5 feet? I don't understand how it works. Help me out.
So that would be in addition to the 24.
So he that,
So the lot width is 24. If the unit is 24, they're gonna have to add that 5 feet.
It'll be 29.
so who owns that 25 feet in the jam?
It can go either way. It can be common area that's part of the HOA. Or it can be, the unit can be wider, because that's a minimum.
That would be 10 feet. I think there's 2 units. I think we started putting the parking lot in that 10 feet.
You could do it at the back of the lot, but not where the homes are. As part of this, there'll be site plan reviews
Right,
that the
right.
planning commission will
Just
see.
understand
There'll,
that.
there'll be professionals looking at it as well.
Other comments or questions on this piece? Doesn't even have to be this piece. We have the entire ordinance. If anything else stood out right now, we're addressing some of the public hearing components that came up. One was parking. The second one was the frontage on a radius. And it felt like we already have that accounted for in our regular ordinance. And it seems like we could just have that same language carry forward or govern in this case. But I don't want to misspeak there.
For the parking?
No, for the
Radius.
frontage on a radius. I thought we'd already accounted for that in the regular city ordinance.
Yeah, I don't know the details on that. I'd have to look and see. I don't have that memorized at what the setback is on radius.
Teresa, do you have that handy by any chance?
In rough context, what it is they don't measure the lot width out of the curb. They go back as far as your setback, and then they measure your frontage up to the setback level, right out front. That's one way in which they do it.
That's typical for most cities. I just don't know Morgan City's exact. Do you have a minute to pull that up?
On radius, your frontage, it was 24 feet. It was measured at the setback. That's
correct.
That's how radius is typically. Work.
And anything that regarding engineering standards, anything that is not in here does apply. I mean, this doesn't, in the case of the alley, we have the cross section, so that will supersede because the
So
city doesn't
anything
have.
that might not be explicitly stated, the existing ordinance will prevail.
Correct, especially when it comes to engineering standards.
Okay,
Your statement.
okay.
All it is it'll say. Then it says at setback, so you've got to do like this one, it's 100 feet, but it's setback.
It's setback measure.
Yeah, maybe what we do is we just add that language at setback. Okay,
I think that's a good add.
okay. I just added that here. I'll do a screen share, show you that, but I did have one other item I wanted to bring up. So this is it right here. Minimum lot width in feet at setback. So the one thing I did bring up, there was a little bit of confusion about street trees. What I'm suggesting, I went to a more simple route, is street trees must be spaced at a minimum of 40 feet. Excluding driveways. Tree species selection must come from the city tree list. Everything else in terms of small or large or whatever, take all that out. Just a very simple approach.
Are conifers in the city tree list?
No,
Then we can take that out too.
well, I'm pretty sure not. They better not be.
I
Um,
I almost want to leave it just to be
Yeah.
just to be,
Doesn't-
There's a problem with specifying city tree list. That becomes outdated and there's other varieties that are more appropriate than that city tree list. So I don't want to tie us to the city tree list. We don't update it often enough. I guess I have more confidence in the landscape architect with the caveat, so we don't want trees.
as approved by staff.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with that. I like that.
That's the mistakes, the city tree list.
Yeah, that came up with us just recently. My neighbor called me and he said, what trees can I plant? And I said, well, there's an ordinance, just go and find the ordinance. And he did, and he came back and said, well, that's a joke. He said, some of those trees are 40 feet tall and this big around. And so he said, yeah, I can plant pretty much anything I want. Because you're saying it needs to be updated because some of those trees are not appropriate.
It's so difficult to get, I don't know if you guys know, I'm actually a licensed landscape architect and I've done hundreds of plans and street tree plans, but it's so difficult to get in an ordinance to say this is the right tree for this, because I look at the park strip width, I look at power lines above. I mean, Rocky Mountain Power has a short tree list just for power lines above. And so those are the two. I look at the park strip width, look at the buildings that are next door, and then I look at what's above as well. And I guess it gets back to this point that it's very difficult to identify all the different situations and all the different right responses. And that's where in the ordinance, we actually require a landscape architect to do the landscape items. And so they're going to have a professional looking at it. And then planning staff will double check it.
But that's not the same with the subdivision.
And I think we can look at that another time.
That's a different situation.
that's a
Okay, we're
different
talking
situ-
about this.
Yeah, we're just talking
Okay.
about this piece.
Steve, you had a comment. You're gonna jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to mention you're right about updating the tree ordinance, but we did put some language in there that if someone came with a proposal, then they could present that and it could be reviewed and so it's not a hard and fast list. There is some flexibility there.
Where trees are being required like this, is it implied, or is this, do we add a note that the trees that are required along the roads are managed by the HOA, the landscape contractor?
That's typically implied, but if you feel it's needed, I mean, that's
Okay.
some cities do tree maintenance. Sounds like Morgan City doesn't. And,
To look into the future when we have these developments with trees every 40 feet and there becomes to be an issue with the trees to where we're not having to deal with a homeowner every 20 feet, you know, and it's just one call to a landscape to an HOA that your trees are too far over the gutter, you know,
Right.
we can't.
and I did, when I added, parking, I did add
Okay,
landscape
so
management.
And so that
So
is.
those are at
that
least the
is-
two minimum
okay,
things,
so
is
it
parking
is-
and landscape, and
as
really
long
that's-
as-
those are some of the two biggest things that a HOA does. There's other items.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure these trees were gonna be somehow considered.
Growing into the snowplow.
You know, so.
While you're on trees, B under landscape plans,
Say that again.
under landscape plans, B, item IB. Page 14 and,
Yes.
yeah, okay, yeah, and number 2. You got minimum of 10, no, I'm sorry, go down to number 2 right there. You got a minimum of 10 trees per acre. And over on the new for common areas, and you scroll down to where you added the new stuff for common, here you've got it at 15, minimum number 3, it's 15. So we're in conflict, either 10 or 15. So it's both.
Private property is 10 and common area was 15. This was intended, but
Number 2,
yeah.
trees landscape in the common areas.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Trees and landscape and common areas.
To me, it's the same area.
Yeah.
Different number.
Okay.
It's wrong.
No, you're right there. So what we need to do is, this should be in for private areas. Is what that's intended.
You're saying that the B landscape plans is for private area. That B section.
Yes. Down below is the common, and then up here is the residential.
Scroll up, does the heading say that?
It just says landscape plans.
That answer your question, right?
Yeah, just want to straighten out that conflict.
Thank you. That's great.
Not a question, what you got, so it's fine. Just straighten out that conflict.
Okay, so we still have the public hearing open.
I'll go through the rest of it.
We can go either way. If we've addressed Ryan, the public's pieces, and then we can continue to discuss those once it's closed, and Ryan can still jump in if he wants, but I was thinking maybe we close the public hearing and then continue finishing out the rest of the discussion, and then take some action on this if we can.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. We close the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All right, I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and vote on closing the public hearing. All in favor? Unanimous in the room. Jay, oh, there you go. I see you now. Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. As a commission will continue to deliberate on any other open items upon review of the draft ordinance. So let's go through that and then take some action on what we recommend for the city council.
Good question on Jake. First one's on statement where you got the other garages. What page is that? 9 on this one I got. Oh, right there. Second to last line, second to last paragraph, there it says like the following. I'm not sure what that one even relates to. standards. I don't see any following,
just
referring
to this
I don't see any following standards, so.
Yeah, I
If
think
it's
we
referred to
could-
that, then the following standard, everybody above them, they need to be there.
we could take that out.
Take the whole thing out of there, they need to be there. Okay, delete that one. Okay. Okay, then. The next question I have in help on this chart, page 12. One thing I'm not seeing there is a rear setback requirement.
There's this one, minimum rear setback alley garages.
That's rally garages. What about for house? What about for a single family home? For garages in an alleyway.
Yeah, that's
I'm
correct.
seeing no setback. I'm seeing no setback.
Yeah. For homes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or even just something that's not alley fed.
So, I would say, based off of what we had, it should be somewhere between 5 to 7 feet least, well, actually, for the home, I would do 10, at least a minimum.
No, I'm just not seeing anything there.
Okay, if the planning commission's okay, I think we can add that minimum rear setback. We'll do homes.
I don't know that it needs to necessarily specify homes. It's either, the question here is either alleys or no alleys. If it's alley fed, then it's a 4-foot setback.
You want to say non-alley?
No, you can have a single family home on non-alley. Your verbiage just says the garage setback and say anything about the house.
So it would be any building that is not on an alley.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. You just cover both scenarios. You have a rear setback that's different if there's an alley than if there's not. Just A or B.
Yeah.
Step back if I'm on an alley with a single family home, I can go to 4. I can go to what?
4 feet.
I don't know how to drive that. My garage is front there.
No, I see what Ray's saying though, where our language makes it sound like the alley garage is at 4 foot.
Yeah.
Maybe we just need to eliminate the garage language. If you're on an alley, your rear setback is
I
4
didn't
feet.
think we had a situation where you have an alley and a front-loaded garage. Like it's,
You typically, you could do it. It doesn't make any sense
Right.
financially or design wise and space planning. However, there's nothing that prohibits it.
If you're intermixing Martinez and single families, where the alley would go past the back of that house.
yeah, I agree. It seems silly, but if it's a loophole, then we can account for it.
Is that impossible though? I grew up in a single family home that had an alley in the back. That's where the garbage cans were,
Yes, but where was your garage?
And where was your garage?
in the front.
In the front.
Mhm.
Inside the house.
Okay. That's actually very rare.
It is, but it's not impossible.
Yeah. So,
You could specify that and just prohibit it.
Well, and I just think Ray was saying, what if I do, what's the rear setback on a home? Period. So if we're saying that's not going to happen when there's an alley back there, then I guess the way we have it as non-alley would cover it.
yeah. And here's the, if there is an alley, you can go back to 4 feet.
If you're-
If there's not an alley, then you're 10 feet.
So do we want to put our minimum rear setback just alley or non-alley and eliminate that garage?
Yes. Yeah, I think that'd be fine.
Doesn't matter to me what it is, just, to me, it wasn't there.
Okay, so this covers it. If you have an alley, you can go to 4 feet. If you don't have an alley, you're at 10 feet. You're given a little bit more space.
The other thing, I'm not understanding, help me understand. The one that says minimum in red there, that says minimum garage setback, non-street facing garage. Help me understand what that is meaning.
Okay,
A side entry garage.
yes, that's the side entry. That's basically, well, I don't have an example of it, but it's where you come in and you turn right away. Have you seen one? You've seen this?
Scroll down, I thought you had it right down. The next one down.
Well, it's essentially, well, it would be this one, except for the garage would be right here. Does that make, so instead of the garage door opens up on the side, and so you pull in and then you turn. That's what that means.
We'll set back from where? From that.
Well, the setback is always, it is from the front. It's a front setback. But because the garage doesn't face the street, then you just pull in and turn, and it's up a little bit closer.
So this is front setback.
Yes,
So if you turn like that, you can have your garage 11 feet.
yeah, you can pull it in a little closer, because you're gonna have space to maneuver elsewhere.
In front of your garage, you have it 20 feet.
Right, well, it's whatever I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be 20, but they could do it, because they just have to have the two stalls. If they want to pull right into the garage, then they can pull right into the garage. If you want.
Here's the one right above that in black, and that's
Yeah.
the one that the garage is facing the street.
Oh, right there.
It's gotta be 20 feet off
Yes.
the street.
Yes,
If the garage is not facing the street, the garage is facing the side, and it only needs to be 11 off.
Yes.
the street. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to- And you can, that's available in medium single family and in twin home. What you got?
yes.
So in twin home, I can't have a front facing garage, I can have one side facing.
You can have a front facing.
You got- And the black and red above it.
Okay.
Yeah. up-
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, no, that is right. Yeah, a twin home is essentially a townhome,
Right. Right, you get two homes.
and that is intended.
You don't allow one to come in front, allow them to come from the side.
Yes. Because we want the architecture on the front.
Um,
Mr. Chair, before he goes on, I'm gonna need to excuse myself. That's all right. I believe there's enough people here for any votes going forward, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excused.
Thanks, Lance.
next that works with the black and white above.
The 4 feet here? So, yeah, what it's saying is that the garage has to be back 4 feet from the front of the home.
But I think he's saying it'd be not applicable for that townhome situation because they wouldn't have a.
That,
Above that, two above that.
yeah, that is correct. So it is non-applicable for the townhome and the twin home. Do you want to change that to NA?
Same thing for single family.
No, it does work for single family. Because it's, the garage has to be pushed back from the front of the home. Regardless of everything else, the garage has to be set back a little bit. That focuses the architecture of the home on the home, and then the garage is secondary.
Back on family, you say garages must be rear loaded.
That is correct.
Unless you can change that language up there,
Yeah,
right there. Right there. Right there. Section A.
Right here.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good catch. That's why we have you, Ray.
You're saying charges must be rear loaded.
Yeah. On these small lots, it is really difficult to,
I'm
Yeah.
okay with this, but the chart contradicts
yeah,
that.
right, we need to, these examples are all
I'm just
rear
trying to give it
loaded.
So they're coherent with each other. I'm
Okay.
not trying to say it's right or wrong, just to me, it's not, they're not saying the same thing. One saying Merry Christmas, the other saying Happy Halloween.
Yeah. I think just for flexibility, I'm okay taking this sentence out and we leave it in the chart.
I make a quick comment on that.
Yeah.
On those, single or the small lots like that, a small family, you're narrowing up so much as well. That you can't have a single car garage face the road. You'll never make the turn coming into the side. Right. Of a garage
Yeah, he's both,
on the street
he's both in the house.
facing. So, you know what I mean? You'll never make that 90-degree turn into your garage. Especially being a single car garage.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to turn that. So either you're out on the alley or you come in,
If it's coming off the street, that's your only option.
well,
And
it,
it face. and just
Yeah,
have a setback.
yeah, it'll just have to be set back farther.
But it says non-applicable. Or not
So I just
applicable.
changed it up there. Let's go back to the table.
Ray was saying.
Okay.
It needs to be at that.
11
feet on that small one.
Yeah,
Here.
11 here, and then,
Yeah,
well, actually, it's this one right here.
20.
Well, we can leave both of those because if someone can figure out how to make that work,
Yeah.
then, okay,
Not that they have to, it's just available if.
Yeah.
I get
okay. All right, what's your next one? Let's just go through these.
That's all I have on that chart.
We got the parking figured, other than there has to be a decision made, which you'll deliberate in a minute.
Underneath, right where you're at, street alley requirements, it says
Oh.
street requirements for city engineers standards. Line number 1 in red.
Okay.
Do we have those standards in place yet?
Yes.
Okay,
So what it means is it's the cross section, which is really the 16 feet
Right.
plus the 4-foot setback. Anything else is per engineering. The materials, the thickness, the stormwater, the runoff, everything else applies and we don't need to touch any of that.
all the other utility easements are all still the same.
Yes.
They don't change at all.
Yes,
Because they'll be out in the front of the street, not in the alley,
correct.
and they'll be in the front yards.
I think so. I mean,
Well,
there will be some stormwater in the alley just because there's going to be water there.
Okay.
And if we need to change the standards to accommodate that, that would be a separate process.
The question I had back on page 7. Yeah, yep, very good, number 3. C, I'm not sure why that applies just to townhomes, not the other others as well.
Okay. Do we not list it in the other ones?
Yeah, that there are no.
Okay. I think,
Why that would be some of the other zones as well.
yeah. So let's go ahead.
Maybe it's not, again, I just.
It was just kind of emphasizing that, you know, it's not always that people do that. I think it's good to, so that they know about the flexibility.
Okay. All right,
That it? Okay,
sorry.
that's good. Okay.
All right.
Anything else? And then we solve the parking and
Yeah,
we're
so
close.
Let's, Ray's gotten his pieces out. Thank you for your homework. Appreciate your diligence. Any other items, Jay, online or here in the room with respect to this ordinance before we?
I just had one quick question. I know we spent plenty of time talking about trees. But it does say that every front yard is required to have a tree regardless of the setback. So even if we're only 7 feet back and there is a parking strip tree, we are still required to have a tree in the
Yeah.
front yard. That's the intention.
Yeah, and
Okay.
there's tiny trees, you know, it could be a tiny tree. And that tree is not, that's separate from the tree list, you know, and there's columnar trees that are 5 feet wide. I don't worry about that.
Okay.
They'll figure that out. And it's intended to have that beauty, you know, and a lot of those will probably end up being flowering trees.
I just wanted to make sure that was the
small-
intention, even in a very small space.
We'll be
But they'll be
approving the landscape.
Part of the
plan.
landscape plan.
And just so for awareness. We're all used to grass, and some of us here coming before, they like to see grass in the front yards and hate to see the horses going on grass, but there will be no grass in the front yard.
No
Just
grass in the
just-
parking strip.
No grass in the front yard either.
If the front yard's at least 8 feet square, can't they have grass?
If they do a wider front yard, which they could,
Good. If they do the
then there
minimum-
could be grass.
They do minimum 7.
Yeah.
The ordinance says it's gotta be at least 8 foot before you put grass in. So what we're saying here is there'll be no grass in any front yard.
And actually, this language matches up really pretty close from where the state is going on
I'm not
and our
saying good or
land.
bad, I'm
and
just
our
saying it's a
landscape
change,
ordinance.
just so you're aware, that's what we're saying. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. That's what this said. That's all I'm saying. There's no grass in the front yard. But most of your pictures show grass in the front yard, so the pictures don't really reflect.
Well-
what it says. The pictures, I understand that.
And Utah's gonna look very different in 20 years.
Right, I agree.
And that requirement actually matches up with the state requirements for landscape ordinances. If the city wants to allow the flip your strip program, get the benefits of that, which that's our next item.
So I think looking at the Utah standards is maybe not the right way because there's not a lot of experience in Utah with that. I mean, I'd look at Las Vegas or Phoenix or some of these places have been doing this for 50 years.
That's where it's all coming from. Those who have spent a lot of time in the state looking at it. And the reason for the 8-foot minimum in terms of grass is that you just cannot irrigate and mow and maintain
Effectively.
a narrow strip of grass.
That I looked at Phoenix. And I've seen what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and I
It's
don't,
Not written that.
I don't think our landscape is gonna end up looking like Phoenix. We get a lot more water. I mean, Las Vegas averages 2 inches of rain a year precipitation. We average 15 in the valley. You're probably more like 17 or 18 up here.
You say so.
So it's gonna be this hybrid difference between, we don't want it to look like Phoenix, but it can't look like Kentucky or Portland or whatever.
I'm just saying Phoenix looks better than what we're designing is my concern.
Yeah.
It's drier and it looks better. They've done it right.
And we'll get that when we get to the landscape ordinance. And
Fair enough.
what I think is gonna happen is, I think we keep our landscape portion in this, and then we do the landscape ordinance, and that supersedes everything. And then we'll have to update and take this landscape ordinance out, and there'll be a single landscape ordinance for the whole city. But because we don't have that now, we need to have it in here, even if it's only for 6 months. And there are, if you remember my presentation on landscape from before, Garbett is doing neighborhoods with no grass and park strips, and they're looking pretty good. And whole developments are starting. We're barely on the forefront of entire developments being water-wise. Up until now, I think the whole history of Utah, it's only been like one house at a time, one apartment, one townhome. But now we're seeing entire neighborhoods, developments that are all water-wise. And you can always have fake grass if you need it.
And it does allow for that. It does allow for that.
It does.
Yours does.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I have a neighbor with fake grass and another neighbor with their escaping. That's, yeah, it's not super good.
And with the xeriscape, I think when we get in the ordinance, that's where we'll require things like weed fabric or require a minimum number of plants so that it can't be, moonscape is a term you hear thrown out once in a while, this idea of just rock. So there's the requirements of limiting grass, but you can also have requirements of requiring plants and maintenance. And the nice thing about this type of development, it's easier to maintain small lots that are water-wise than a big lot. I've only seen, if you're over in Eden, in Ogden Valley, right before you're coming around on the north side of Pineview Reservoir, there's one, it's like a 2-acre lot and the whole thing is water-wise. I mean, it's all kinds of rock and it's very intricate and looks good. That's the only example I've seen in the whole state of a 1-acre or 2-acre lot that's water-wise. I mean,
I agree. The smaller lots. That makes sense. I still struggle with, it feels like we're being punitive to some degree on something that's not gonna move the needle. It'd be like the equivalent for air control saying, let's shorten driveways by 5 feet, so there's less emissions when you pull into your house. Is there less emissions? Well, of course there's less emissions. Is it gonna move the needle? Heavens no. And it's very similar to what we're doing with the parking strips thing. So that's just how I felt about it.
Okay.
That doesn't hang me up on the ordinance though.
okay.
I understand what we're doing.
Should we solve the parking issue?
So we're at that point. If there's no other, Aaron, we got your comments. Anything else from your end, Mark?
Nope.
So I think we are at the point where we make that final recommendation if the edits that have been recorded throughout this conversation are acceptable. Go back to your parking language.
Yeah, so we'll update this number after we do this from below. This is what I have in there. Each unit must have a minimum of 2 dedicated stalls per unit located at the dwelling, and a minimum of 1 garage stall is required per dwelling. Take that out. 1/2 visitor stall is required for each unit. The visitor parking must be located within 150 feet of each dwelling unit.
So let's talk about that. One of the options that's going all the way to making it a little bit more generous from a developer standpoint. No, you don't agree with that?
There's really a minimum of 2 dedicated stalls per unit located, and a minimum of 1 garage stall. And says you're doing both of them.
Yeah, just with one of
Okay.
those being a garage.
Yeah.
And says you're doing both.
Okay, that's a good point. With a minimum of 1 garage stall per dwelling, we can take out required.
Okay, that's better.
Okay. And 1/2 visitor stall is required for each unit. The visitor parking must be located within 150 feet of each dwelling. And that's where they'll come in with a plan and staff will look at it and be like, okay, these 10 visitor stalls or these 5 visitor stalls are located within that distance. It's a pretty generous, that's 2 lot widths approximately in in the plan. And it could be as the bird flies, because we don't specify the direction. So that does allow that flexibility. And of course, a sidewalk can go any given way. It doesn't have to be linear down the street.
So I don't think that's where the debate was, right? I think we just clarified that part. The debate is then how much additional. Is it half allocation per unit, a full allocation per unit? Is it 100 feet proximity, 150 feet proximity? Those feel like, you know, the open questions.
Well, is this enough of a change to be more attractive to a developer? Is it making a difference? Because we have to walk that line, right? We don't want it to look like a parking lot, but we also don't want it to be so restrictive that nobody wants to take advantage of this and use it. So is that going to make a difference to a developer to have that extra half stall?
It's not an extra half stall. It's a
Or, well,
reduction.
less.
Yeah, think about it this way, with the RM ordinance is at 1/3. This is 1/2, you know, so, and they are building at 1/3. I mean, we are seeing that. However, in this case, we are requiring some of the homes to be single family. The others are townhomes, so they're not apartments. So we're expecting a little bit more coverage. I mean, your household size is probably maybe a little bit smaller than a 1/4 acre lot household, and maybe a little bit bigger than apartment. I mean, people will self-select if they want to live there. But if you think about averages, that's kind of where it will come in. Typical household size is 3.5.
I mean, on the one hand, having this built into the CCRA, or not CCRA, CCNA.
CCNRs.
CCNR. I work with a vendor called CCRA.
Oh,
CCNRs, you know, this can be self-governing. On the other hand, with the smaller types of developments like this is designed to accommodate. I'm conscious of, you know, what you experienced. Now that was a bigger development. But making sure that, you know, people can actually park and that all the stalls aren't taken up, all the visitor stalls aren't taken up by the residents that have no room in their driveways and garages.
what we could add is, under that CCNRs, we could add something including visitor parking. So we at least tell the HOA, when you come in with your CCNRs, you need to have something that navigates that line between some flexibility and also that for the most part, visitor parking is
I'm more
is
comfortable
intended-
with something like that,
is
just so
intended
it
for
makes
visitor.
sense. You know, otherwise I feel like if there's no reason why I couldn't use that spot and it's only 100 feet away or 150 feet away, you know, that's where my teenager's gonna park. I get the garage, but there's always a car there. And when visitors come, hard to find a parking spot. So that's kind of the concern.
But when you talk about Mark, did it have a main street in front of that area? Or does it all come back, in a private lane?
It was just all, it's a main street going through it. There's
There-
no alley.
There is a main street going through it. Was there parking on the side of that main street?
There's no parking on that main street.
So this is one difference here. There's a main street without parking on it. So that's gonna accommodate for some extra visitor parking.
Be allowed on street
Mhm.
during the
They're
day.
gonna get out on the street. So that's gonna accommodate for some.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If- if
that'll
it-
help most of the time.
That will help most of the time. That'll help the majority of the time. That will help.
I
Yeah,
found out the
on-street
hard way
parking.
when I parked there
Yeah.
and I got a ticket saying you can't park there.
That's why I asked that question. If there's no parking on the street, just within the development itself, that's different. Where in this case, as I talked to Lance, our main street requirements will remain the same as far as width and parking, that kind of stuff. Nothing changes on the main street going through.
Yeah.
There will still be parking on the main street, as I understand it.
Yeah,
So that helps some with the extra parking, at least in my mind.
that's
Yeah,
correct.
but to your point, that's an issue where my daughter lives, is that the parking spaces that are intended for visitors, other people, residents are parking their vehicles there. And in fact, every time I go there, there's a van with a business on it. That's always parked there, and that is visitor parking. So that's an issue. I mean,
But I feel like that's a separate issue. That's not something that we can regulate, and that's not something that we need to allow more parking spots to anticipate that.
but the HMO should be able to control that. right?
Yes, they should.
It's like a shelf.
Yeah,
You have a flat space, you're gonna stack on.
Exactly. It's gonna fill up.
I get that, and I'm comfortable as long as, you know, we're calling it out head on.
With that in mind, Ray's point that we will still have on-the-street parking during the day, year-round, I feel comfortable lowering it to a requirement of 2.5 rather than 3.
And with what you just typed, I can
have to wait.
go along with that.
I want to add one more thing, outdoor storage. I just was imagining all these RVs and stuff like that. And we don't need to go into that, but we can say, put that in the CCNRs.
Outdoor storage is what? How many are available or?
Anything out that you're storing outside, cars, whatever.
Does the city have any recourse if the homeowners association does not enforce this?
It gets really tough. I mean, zoning policing is self-reporting, sending out letters. And then if it gets bad, then you have to send fines and liens, and I don't know. I don't do that part of Morgan City.
Things about it is. And Ray's aware of this, like the CCNRs are actually reviewed and approved during the subdivision portion. Then, you know, then it is a process to prosecute an HOA, but you know, if we get complaints, we can do some things, code enforcement against the HOA. That isn't, you know, putting them in a, you know, where you have to legally do something through the courts, but and then you get some good HOAs and you don't. We were talking about, there's ones that in the city that had a really active HOA, and it was a small one. I looked at buying one there, and they were specifically, you were allowed to have 2 cars, and they were required to be in the garages, and no parking outside of your garage, even though they had a driveway. The driveway was used for loading and unloading only. And you know, and they were adamant when they were selling the home that you were aware that these had to be taken care of. And so I think it's just.
Well,
it's a
you run
hit
that
and miss.
risk with any private
Yeah,
residence.
and you'll have some that just could care less what's happening and are lucky if they even mow the lawn. And then you have those that are really take care of it. But we do have our code enforcement issue, things that we can, you know, ticket for. But
To some extent, you still self-select. If you want to be subject to that, you know what you're getting into when you move in. Hopefully, everyone else is playing by those rules.
we get back to the developer named Brian.
Buy a home as HOA, that you're signing part of the. And the rental unit, then the owner should require review of HOAs.
but not in an HOA. If before the city will take any action, there has to be a complaint issued by, you have to receive a complaint, or do you actively? Okay, okay.
What else with respect to the parking?
Go back up to where in. Investigation. The last part, 1/2 visitor stall is required for each unit. You can take, I think you can take the word the visitor parking out, just say for each unit to be located within 150 feet. Yeah. Just shortens up. I like less verbiage, but it means the same. Okay. On the one up above, I wonder if afterward, oh. Yeah, good change, thank you. Point five three.
There's a line for those.
I know, I know. On that other change, yeah, each unit must have a minimum of 2 dedicated stalls per unit at the dwelling. That's awesome. Then with a minimum of 1 garage stall per dwelling, we need to put with a minimum of 1 of the 2. Somehow that counts for one of the 2 that's required.
One of those.
Yeah, somebody needs. That makes sense, maybe what I'm saying.
Yeah.
One of which is a
I would
garage
say
stall.
that, yeah, one of which is a garage, yeah, like that.
Or one of which is required to be in the garage.
That's great.
That's sufficient so they know that they can do a 2-car garage if they want. So somebody feels like they have to do the one.
What else from a parking standpoint, and if that addresses what we've covered, then we can maybe take some action on this. Well, seeing no further discussion, it feels like we're about ready to make a motion. I'd call for that now. One way or another to pass this on to the city council with a favorable recommendation with the edits that have been outlined throughout this meeting, or not. So that's one action that can be taken.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I move that we pass the mixed use overlay ordinance 2203 on the city council with a favorable recommendation. With the changes made, we've discussed. And I'll add something else on discussion.
Thank you for a second. Thank you. Before voting, any discussion on the motion? Mr. Ray.
We've discussed a lot of changes here, and Jake's really good at putting them in. But I would like to take a look at, make sure they're all in before they go to city council, so there's not some stuff they have to sort through. I don't know how to best do that. I don't know if you want to give me a copy after you get them made, send it to us. And then send us a clean copy, and then we could look at it and say, yep, good to go. Or Jake, maybe consider putting, we talk about this, would you consider putting that in before it goes to city council? I don't know how to equitably do that, but.
You would make, let's just say you find something that grammatical error or anything like that. Go ahead and get those.
Yeah, right.
If there's a change in content, then that change passed on to the city council. They could decide how they want to do this.
And all I'd be looking at is changes that we made if for some reason you didn't put them in.
Does it need to go to the city council where they see the original and the changes though?
They should see the final.
Yeah.
Well, I get that they can see it right now, but because that's what was presented publicly, like, do they need to see the original?
No, they should just see it as written. And that's fine. A cleaner version. More appropriate.
Sure.
Because there's minutes and this is recorded, everything's on the screen. And it is acceptable that I'll send it out.
I'd like to see the clean version. Give it, you time to, I'm assuming it's gonna be fine. Because you have a chance to be less cumbersome for the city council if we, follow a couple.
So are you comfortable with that approach?
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the motion? Let's go ahead and vote at this point then. All in favor of the motion as outlined? It's unanimous. I saw your hand, Jay. Thank you. Motion passes. So, thank you for that. That was easy. We do have a second item. It is 9 p.m. And not that we have a time limit necessarily, but we do have a stamina limit. How do we want to proceed with the second piece, which is a discussion relating to landscape ordinance, ADUs, and short-term rentals? That feels like a really involved conversation. We've started some of this, particularly with the accessory dwelling units, but we have not addressed short-term rentals in discussion yet, and that's a big one just on its own. So we could lay something out here, start part of the conversation, or we could table this for a future agenda. I don't have a preference. I'm just trying to be sensitive to the workload in front of us and the time remaining.
I suggest we table it for a future agenda.
Each of the, Jay just commented table, each of the items are quite a bit to unpack and discuss. Yeah, they're not short.
So one of the things, just to let you know, is like the ADUs, we were probably halfway through that. So we could pick up from your draft. Didn't you get as far as a draft?
Yes. It was kind of a conceptual one.
The concept.
Has all the kind of the framework of it. But I could bring back a draft ordinance for ADU. I guess maybe the one question, maybe we shouldn't even debate it because the time is, which is the priority.
Yeah, and that could be, that would probably be a good thing, because what legislature is trying to do through this session, and Jake's probably already told you that this is the most bills they've done ever, and the most land use changes, and some of them are pretty dramatic. Our processing one is huge, and that's going to be a big thing for staff to do. But Mark's got some hard copies of those, but they did talk a lot about short-term rentals is becoming where it needs to be regulated because it's becoming a nuisance. We even have some issues in the city where they're doing it without just because, and we'll have 8 to 10 cars parked a night in a home that does short-term rentals per room. Anyway, that's another story, but we should probably prioritize, because that's what we want to do as a staff is get planning commission's main focus on ordinance changes and possibly change ordinances where it's city approval for some of the minor things that shouldn't really need to come to the city, to the
I
planning
think it is
commission.
time. I'm curious, do we know what's shaping up for next month's agenda?
Right now, I have an application for historic overlay review. The co-op or poultry building has put in a building permit application that we'll need to look at the facade of that building. Other than that, yeah,
Is that in the railroad right
Yeah.
away? That's the one kind of in the
The
island?
one that we've been talking about. They've come to pre-development. We've had a lot of discussion with them. There's some big ticket items that have to be done, and so they've, we weren't sure where they were, but we just got the application this week. And so the building is a remodel. They're not going to tear it down. They're going to try to preserve quite a bit of it. And so, which I'm excited about.
From a working session standpoint, the general plan, what are the next steps?
It's going on to the consultants.
Okay, so we potentially could have the working session and still move this into the general session as well.
Yes, yes. And I don't think the general plan will be back next month.
So whichever you want to do as far as maybe we can do a discussion on one of these items or something else that you prefer to look at.
I would maybe just break them out into 3 pieces instead of having it all be one agenda item.
And which one you want.
Uh,
There's a list.
I'd probably do the one we've started first, accessory dwelling units, then do short-term rentals second, and the landscape ordinance third. I mean, they all need to be addressed, but I'd probably take them in that order.
One comment on the landscape. Morgan City residents are not eligible for the Flip Your Strip program until the city passes an ordinance. And so with the summer coming up, there may be people who want to have access to that grant money to flip their strip. And so thinking about timing there, that's just something to consider.
Another thing, like on the short term.
Others are motivated. We've heard it. We've heard
And on
it.
the short-term rentals, it's a new concept throughout the state, and that could be something that we could wait till some other cities iron out the problems.
And the landscape ordinance is only applicable to new development. We're not telling anybody who has grass. So as long as you don't move and build new, we're not gonna make you rip out your grass. Applies to new development, and also coming down the pipeline, the state has put a lot of money into it and they're serious about this. It's gonna go from $125 a square foot upwards of $3. So somewhere between $2.50 to $3, and it'll be applicable to front yards, areas that don't have homes that don't have park strips, which we have in the city, they'll be applicable to. So it actually is getting really aggressive on change.
Since this is a public record, I want it on the record that I am in favor of water conservation. Believe in that. Just for the record.
But
Okay. However, I would suggest we flip that order. We flip that order and do ADUs, because we have a draft framework ordinance, landscape ordinance, and then
Thanks, Ryan.
thanks, Ryan. And then third is nightly rentals. And with the nightly rental, I almost suggest a joint discussion with the city council, because so much of that is philosophy and where do we want them? How do we want them? What do they want to do? I could see the planning commission go in one direction and maybe the city council wants a different one. So I almost recommend just kind of a joint discussion to see philosophically where we land.
So state your order that you're.
ADU, landscape, and then short-term rental. And that is addressed first as a joint discussion. And on the landscape, that could just be a standing item. If next month we have time, then we talk about landscape. I can have something in the queue. If we don't have time, then we just kick it.
If I take my own personal bias out of it, what is the city here more about? I feel like I hear more on short-term rental stuff. People ask me that on the street. What are you guys doing about this? No one ever asked me about flipping the strip. So I'm just
It hasn't been
curious.
done.
Well,
It's
I
not
get
available.
I get it.
from a grant perspective.
I get that, but I'm, what are the citizens of Morgan City, what are they more interested in right now? Like,
I think we should ask the mayor. Hey, we have one.
cause I don't know. I mean, I haven't been.
So we're asking for what's coming to my ears the most?
And what's at stake is if we act too slowly, we won't get an ordinance in place in time for residents to take advantage of flip the strip. That's what's at risk.
That's probably the number one thing that I hear, or at least more of that than I do the short-term rental.
That's the answer then.
And we could even do that before the ADU as well. Because it is, I'm looking at doing it for my house. And I'm seeing this process and I have to go to a class on Saturday, even though I already know what to do and how to do it. I have to go to a class, I have to submit and kind of follow their process. Because it is state money, it is a regulated process.
How does everybody feel then if we do it in the order that's outlined right here? Landscape ordinance, ADUs and short-term rentals, just called out in separate pieces. And we start. Yeah, I mean, you could put the other ones if you want, just separate line items, separate agenda items, or put them
Okay.
the other two in the working session and this come in the general. session.
Okay. I can do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
And I neglected to tell you that, you know what, we have received that grant, and the governing body is the planning commission. So right now, I'm anticipating, Ty Bailey coming to May meeting to go over the city's priorities as far as our, TLC grant that we've talked about. Because there is kind of like a scope of work on some things that we need to get done, that when we applied for the grant. And so we're gonna kind of go over that a little bit. I believe he said we were doing it in May. It might be June. Just depends on his schedule.
I'm unfamiliar with, maybe I just can't remember, but the TLC grant.
Yeah, it stands for Transportation Land Use Connection. And the grant money that Morgan City received is to do a downtown plan, a downtown ordinance, and also parks and trails.
Okay.
So getting into the details of some of the things, zooming in from general plan level to, let's look at the downtown, let's update our downtown ordinance. That could include, and I think it should include, the master plan community area we're talking about, and also parks and trails planning. And that ordinance could and probably should be more form-based code type.
Great.
In order to pass ordinance on the flip the strip, does it require full landscape ordinance redone? Or we just do the portion of flip the strip and work on landscape ordinance down the road a ways?
So it does require that for all new development, we do a new
A
ordinance,
full new landscape.
full new
ordinance.
landscape ordinance. And it hits commercial pretty good, a little bit residential and also industrial. It's essentially a single landscape ordinance, and it applies to new development. And that makes the city eligible for the flip the strip program
For existing,
for existing.
okay.
So that's the carrot, or the carrot is the flip your strip, and the stick is you got to put in a new landscape
New
ordinance that
ordinance.
meets our requirements. And I have a list, I'll send out a link, but I have a list of all the cities that have done it in Weber Basin, and there's quite a bit.
Okay, so you're good with that, Teresa?
Cactus and front yards.
The cactus and the pine tree. Okay, yeah, whatever it takes, right? Um, Okay, and. Yeah, and in the work session, we'll also, we might not even get to it, which I'm okay with. And, yeah, let's just put the one on the agenda for sure.
And before I send it out to, or post it, I'll just send it to you too. So
Okay,
you can see if it's in the way you want it.
all right, thank you. Do we need to, someone remind me, formally table this agenda item?
With it being a discussion, I don't think that you need.
Okay, so as a discussion, we're good.
Yeah, it's not, you can make that format.
Well, I mean, like, do we need to
Right, right,
make a
yeah.
motion to table it? Okay. All right, great, then let's adjourn for the evening. Unless there's any final thoughts from anyone. Meeting adjourned.